Chapter 10. The Pinching of Pincher, Redbeak, Tercelin the Crow, Autram the Drowned Man, Isegrim and the Game with the Rams, or how Master Reynard was able to settle his scores without difficulty. Reynard did not wait for dawn to whiten in the sky. Jubilant from his twofold success, he shook his wet coat and with a light step set out towards the glade and the river. The rain had finally stopped. A strong, healthy wind was hustling the clouds across the sky, driving them towards the horizon. The day promised to be radiant. Never had Reynard been so vividly or so delightfully aware of the course of his destiny. He was sure to be successful in anything he undertook today. There was no room in his heart for doubt or timidity. Had he already reached the river? The sky was showing pink in the east. The cocks were crowing towards the houses. The fox found himself in the meadows, which were usually dry and resounded beneath his feet, but this morning the ground wasn't steady. He went on, his nose slipping through the flowers and the horsetails. A reed warbler flew up in front of him, wheeled round and alighted behind him. And then, all at once, he saw the water gleaming below the grass, spreading a little further and glittering everywhere. He heard, mingled with the loud voice of the wind, the cool, flowing movement of the current. It had been raining so hard over the hills and fields upstream that the river was overflowing in one of those summer floods which come suddenly and severely, pass cheerfully by and go on their way. But, for the moment, it was passing, attracting the water birds, curlews, herons, sea swallows, and with them the birds of prey, buzzards, harriers, crows, and rooks. "Good," said Reynard. "I'll find my friends." And licking his whiskers, he thought, "And I wager I won't have to run as far as my friend Isegrim." He jumped from mound to mound and reached the edge of the stream, and there he stood, Reynard the hunter, meditating one of his deeds, his legs drawn up, his belly close against the grass, his neck outstretched, his ears pricked, his nose twitching, while his eyes shone brightly, keeping watch all around, the eyes, in short, of a fox on the prowl. That was how he came to see Pincher the heron, who was fishing, the water coming up to his thigh joints. Raising his head jerkily, he looked up and downstream, then peered into the water, his beak extended, made a sudden dart and brought out his catch, a young carp with a wriggling tail. He tossed it up into the air, quivering against the blue sky, until it finally fell between the terrible nipping jaws. The flood was passing by, carrying thick bundles of hay torn from the stacks, coarse hay made up of dry bracken and reeds, which floated on the water without sinking. Reynard took a reed and deflected the bundles towards the creek where Pincher was fishing. When the first of them brushed against him, the fisher-bird shuddered, raising his wings as though to fly away. But a second bundle was already passing, then a third. Pincher, with the tip of his scissor-like beak, pulled a few twigs out of it. It was only floating hay. He was reassured, dipping his beak into the water again, and fished out a baby roach. Reynard, however, using the reed as an oar, continued to direct the passing bundles of hay. This time he guided them towards himself, gradually heaping them together and weaving them into a floating raft. He took a deep breath and jumped, like a fasting fox, a lightweight fox, with delicate bones and a downy coat, and then he was launched on the hay, paddling with his reed straight towards the heron. What a cry there was! It made all the birds of the riverbank whirl round on the water. All they saw was Reynard dragging Pincher's dead body over the meadow. Nobody saw the leap, the gleaming white teeth, the movement of the jaws which wrung the heron's neck. He bled to death beneath a willow tree, and Reynard saved a leg for the morning. The heron's flesh was warm yet tasteless, smelling of the marshland mud. There was a rustling behind the willow stump. Reynard raised his muzzle and sniffed to the wind. "Oh ho, Redbeak, are you sheltering?" He had not dared to hope for such a stroke of luck. The very force of the wind had just served him so well that his morning confidence was altogether increased. But the partridge was about to fly away. The clever Reynard spoke quickly. "What a wind, Redbeak! How can you stand up in it?" "There's nothing easier," said Redbeak. "In what way?" "I put my head under my wing," said Redbeak, "and all at once it's comfortably dark. warm and peaceful." "Yes," said Reynard, "if, as you maintain, it were easy. But I say no, it's impossible." "Not for me, Reynard," said Redbeak. "I challenge you to do it." The innocent bird placed her red beak and her bright black eyes beneath her wing. Alas, the next moment she found a warmth and a peace from which she was never to wake again. "Well," said Reynard, licking his chops, "that was good for once. There's one creature who won't trick me any more, one bird who'll never try to tickle my whiskers again. Whose turn is it now?" And at that moment he saw a pair of black, outstretched wings hovering between the tops of the poplar trees to the right, coming in his direction. A burnt child dreads the fire, the saying goes, but a Reynard who has been laughed at forgets nothing. Now came yet another proof of it. He quickly lay down on his back, stretched his legs out stiffly, and let his tongue hang out. But this time the fox did not close his eyes. He made them look dull and dim by quenching their tiny glitter. This was a fox's trick, for he kept his clear vision, and the watchful look remained in the depths of his eyes. He saw Tercelin come closer and swoop down on him, onto his red tongue. How could he come down so quickly, without his wings showing the slightest movement? But Reynard leapt even more quickly. His teeth pierced Tercelin's breast, cracking his breastbone against his heart. "Mercy!" squawked the old crow. His pitiful cawing ended in a gurgle. His eyes became dim, while Reynard sparked into life. In the sharing out that never ends, life and death had made their choice. "Good," said Reynard. "That makes 3, but I feel I haven't finished. Who's next?" He listened to the rook's cawing and reflected on a wicked ruse that would place him at his mercy. Agnes, the Vavasor's little daughter, adored eating sweets made of walnut syrup, and she covered her little fingers with it, making herself sticky up to her ears. Next time she threw down an empty packet in the meadow, Reynard would slip some nice fat white grubs into it. The rook, from the top of the poplar tree, would miss nothing with his piercing eyes. He would alight, he would hop up and down round the packet, and all at once he would thrust his beak into it. What a pleasant thought! The packet would go over his head and blind him. He would stagger, dance about, beat his wings, lift one leg and fall over on one side. The packet would cling and stick, ensnare him and hood him. Then the crazy bird would fly away, going straight up, higher, higher still, up and further away. He would disappear. Would he ever come down again? Only when his heart had burst open, and he would hurtle down onto the hard earth, or drown himself in the river. Reynard's eyeballs fluttered. He yawned and dozed. He was satisfied and very comfortable. He had reached one of the haystacks that the flood had spared. It was as soft and deep as a nest. He snuggled down into it and disappeared. If only Ermelin had been there. There were no insects. The air was pure and keen. It was even more comfortable than Malpas. He slept. He dreamt. He was floating along in an endless peaceful flight. He floated, his wings outstretched. He was cradled, held in soft arms, so content that he hoped he would wake in order to enjoy his comfort more. Then he did wake, rubbed his eyes, and all at once jumped up in alarm. Everywhere around him was water. The river had risen further and quietly carried away the haystack on which he had lain down, and now the current was bearing them away, absorbing the hay stalk by stalk, drinking it up, weighing it down. Reynard found himself curled up in a kind of duck's nest, his hind quarters exposed to the wind, the water gurgling round his belly. He struggled to climb to the top and looked round the countryside. Where was the humpback bridge? Where was the village? On the right he had just passed them. The houses were standing in water. The cattle were lowing in the stables. There was not a living being in sight. Yes, there was. A boat was coming towards him, and a man was rowing it. Reynard squatted down. He had recognised the man. It was Autram, the horrible Autram, who was slinking from haystack to haystack, or tree to tree, looking for animals or birds perching there, hares from the fields, partridges, turkeys from the meadows who had been caught unawares by the flood. He must have seen something move on Reynard's haystack. He was rowing as hard as he could. He came closer and attacked him with an oar, which the fox just managed to avoid, but he had to jump, and the poacher saw him. He laughed, the stumps of his teeth showing through his fiery red beard. "Reynard, my fox with a black tail!" He began to beat him with the oar. Reynard slid onto the other side of the stack and began to swim. Each stroke of the oar struck the hay. From time to time Reynard showed his nose in order to excite Autram more. It was hardly necessary, for his skin was steaming at the neck of his jersey. He swore, spat into the water, and went on hitting. All at once he jumped onto the hay in order to beat the fox at his own game. "Oh, Autram, how you underestimate Reynard! He follows one trick with another, and this one will destroy you. You can jump well, but Reynard can jump better." Reynard leapt into Autram's boat, and Autram fell into the water, for the haystack, beneath the blows and the weight, was collapsing. "Goodbye, Rufus," cried the fox. "It's all over, Autram. You're drowning, Autram. I, Reynard, am Rufus now." "Surly will kill you!" cried Autram. "We shall see," said Reynard, "but you are done for." The boat sailed on, borne away by the current. Autram floundered and swallowed water. Once more his tousled red head bobbed up among the remains of the hay. Once more it sank and vanished into the bosom of the deep water. Reynard steered as well as he could with the oar that had remained in the boat. He landed in a meadow which sloped down from the edge of the forest. And then, in that meadow, after that day which had been so full and complete, he saw, beneath his very nose, the biggest and most unexpected surprise he had had for many a day. There were several animals there. Snorter, Lord de la Fouille's black bull, Chaser the marten stretched out along the branch of an oak tree, 2 rams with big horns, a white ewe a little further away, and other silhouettes among the trees. He recognised the tall antlers of Bamber, the stag with the 14 horns, and his hinds with their long, graceful necks, as well as his cousin, the clumsy Grimbart, and others, many others. They were all shuddering and looking reluctantly at the flooded plain. The running water seemed to frighten them and attract them at the same time. But Reynard had eyes only for one animal amongst them all, a grey form lying near the trees, with 2 yellow eyes fixed on his, watching him approach. "Greetings, Reynard," said Isegrim. He seemed fresh and rested, as though he had slept all night at his Galaran lair. As he came up to him, Reynard admired the wonderful vigour that after such ordeals could still leave him with clear eyes and fat muscles. But what must the wolf have been thinking? Since he did not know, Reynard said, "Bravo, uncle." Isegrim condescended to smile. "Well, yes, it was quite a good joke. Thanks to you, I made him lose heart and change his course. He left the wood at dawn when he understood that I was going to bring him to bay. I went on running for a long time after he had gone away, but we'll find him again, won't we, Reynard?" "Indeed we shall," said the fox. A commotion near the bottom of the meadow caused them both to turn their heads. It was a sound of staccato bleating, the sound of rams in a rage, stamping and pawing the ground. "What's that?" said Reynard. "Bleater and leader," said the wolf. "There's only one ewe between 2 rams. It's been going on for hours. If it lasts any longer, I'll bite them." He raised his muzzle and shouted in his fiercest voice. "Be quiet there! This is the wolf speaking!" But the rams only bleated more loudly, Bamber the stag and Snorter the bull bellowing with them. "We can understand them! No bloodshed here! 1 ewe for 2 rams! Let them fight! She belongs to the one who uses his horns best!" "Listen," cried Reynard. "I've got an idea." "Adopted in advance," said the wolf. "Bamber and Snorter are right. No bloodshed, not even a fight. A peaceful contest, a race.
Another one,
muttered Isegrim. Not for you, uncle, said Reynard. For the rams.
But what could we have for a winning post in this flat meadow?
You yourself, uncle, said Reynard. You stay right in the middle of the meadow. Bleater goes to one end, Leader to the other. The distances must be equal. We'll pace them out. I'll give the signal. Bleater and Leader, still bleating and giving savage jerks with their chins, each went to opposite ends of the meadow. They were both males with flinty foreheads, their jointed, striped horns curling around in huge rings. Candida, the pink-nosed ewe, nibbled delicately at a tuft of grass from time to time, as though she were 100 leagues away. Here, uncle, said Reynard, right in the middle. He had measured out the steps and put the competitors in place himself, whispering hints and instructions into their ears. Isegrim sat down fiercely in the middle of the meadow, his head upright and his tail in the air. Go, gentlemen, said the fox, taking 3 steps backwards. The earth flew up, and the grass too. There had never been such a charge in the memory of ram kind. Their heads lowered, their horns forward, Bleater and Leader started from each side together, arrived, and with a crash, reached the winning post. They leapt into the air with a clash fiercer and louder than the impact of arms on a shield. They both fell to their knees, and with their noses down and a stupid expression on their faces, they breathed over Isegrim's body lying between them on the grass, flatter than a squashed flea.